Hey, welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study. Thank you for joining us again in our study of the Sermon on the Mount, sort of analyzing some of the teachings of Jesus. Remember that as we talk about Jesus in this particular lesson is kind of representative of a lot of the things that he would have been talking about to the general populace, not some of the specific stuff that he would do with the disciples or the apostles, but that it's always very God-centered, very kingdom-centered, very heaven-centered. And then he's going to talk mainly in this section. He's talking to a group of common people, but telling them if your righteousness doesn't exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you're not going to see the kingdom. And so he's been systemically talking about maybe four pillars that the Pharisees built their righteousness on. And we talked about legalism, the external obedience of the law, the letter of the law, and ignoring the spirit of the law. And we talked about egotism, as my brother says it, where the things that people do religiously are done to impress people rather than to serve God. And then tonight we're going to look at the section in Matthew chapter 6 where he attacks them on their materialism. It seemed to be in the first century that if someone was sick or someone was poor, they were seen as having been somehow spiritually inferior. You remember in our study of John in chapter 9, the disciples see a man and he was born blind, and they asked Jesus the question, who sinned, this man or his parents? Somehow they thought that any kind of physical infirmity, all the way down to being poor, was some indication or somehow indicative that a person wasn't in a good standing with God. So Jesus, as he talks about how it is to be righteous and not just religious, he starts this section, Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there is your heart also. Notice this heaven focus. Jesus said, you can think about the material, or you can think about the spiritual. Now, when he talks about moth and rust, he's basically talking about any process of corruption, anything that reminds us that the things of this planet are temporary. My brother, Gerald, used to say, this is like the old Let's Make a Deal, with Monty Hall and the lovely Carol Merrill. Behind door number 1 is something worthless that you can't keep. Behind door number 2 is something priceless that you can't lose. Now, when you think of it in those terms, that's a no-brainer. You don't have to be a rocket surgeon, as the old boy said, to figure this out. You can put your emphasis on the things of this planet. You can put your focus on the things of this planet. And at some point, you're going to see corruption. You're going to see degradation. You're going to see obsolescence. Or you can change and focus on something that can never be taken away from you. And then he adds, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Our value system comes from an internal position. And the things that are internal in us basically tell people a lot about us. I remember years ago when Lonnie Beth was little, we were goofing around and she got a hold of my big flashlight that I use when I'm out in the dark hanging out with the cops. And she kept shining it down my mouth and was leaning my head back and saying, Daddy, open wider, Daddy, open wider. And there's a lot of giggling and goofiness going on. And then she just flopped down on the couch beside me and said, I can't see your heart. And we laughed that a little 4 or 5-year-old would think that you can see a person's heart. And they laugh at us because we think you can't. You see, when you demonstrate that work is more important than worship, people can see your heart. When you treat things as more important than people, people can see your heart. When you put things before your family, people can see your heart. Jesus says, when I see what's important to you, when I see the things that you are expressive about your life, when I see your treasure, I see your heart. And the things that we count as treasure the things that we count as valued and valuable, will be manifestations of our priorities in the way we live life. So Jesus says, look, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Then he says, the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, the whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, the whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? He goes from the heart, indicating being like a compass toward our treasure, to our eyes. What are your eyes looking for? What are your eyes seeking? What do your eyes rest upon? He says the eyes are the lamp of the body. And so if you're shining your beacons, if you're shining that light, whatever that comes to rest on, that's going to be what's important. Whatever they come to rest on. And if the eyes are the lamp of the body, then that light that comes in and goes out lights up the whole body. And if you're resting your eyes on the right thing, your body will be full of light. But he does this interesting thing. What if the light within you is darkness? That's an interesting phrase. What if the light within you is darkness? What if there's something that we call our light, but it's not light, it's the opposite? If the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? What are your eyes resting on? What is your heart seeking out? What is the treasure? And then when you shine the light of your body into the world, is it looking at people? Is it looking at things? Is it looking at fame? Is it looking at being a servant? So Jesus says the heart is indicative of who we are internally. Our eyes are indicative of who we are internally. And then after challenging the idea that, if the light inside you is darkness, how great is that darkness? He simply makes this statement. Verse 24, no one can serve two masters. Now he expounds on this because he says either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money. King James Version says you can't serve both God and mammon. He uses the term mammon as an anthropomorphism. He takes material things and makes it look like a deity or a god or an idol. You can't serve two masters. I've got a little essay that I wrote for some guys that do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's called Grappling with Life, Controlling Your Inside Space. And it's a discussion of how to set limits and how to protect yourself psychologically, emotionally, and spiritually. And one of the things that we talked about in one of the essays is that everything you say yes to is something else you say no to. When you decide to serve this, you've decided not to serve this. When you've said yes to this, you've said no to this. But as we go on in that chapter, there's a discussion that says, but also every time you say yes to something, you say yes to some correlations. You say yes to some collaborative things. You say yes to some things that also go along with that. So when you say yes to things, you've said yes to all those things that go along with it. So you've got to pick who your master is. When you say yes to God, you say yes to love. You say yes to selflessness. You say yes to putting others first. You say yes to peace. You say yes to service. When you say yes to stuff, when you say yes to money, when you say yes to materialism, then you've said yes to being selfish. You've said yes to being greedy. You've said yes to covetousness. You've said yes to living in a world that is controlled by the idea of evolution, that I'm the biggest, I'm the meanest, I'm the baddest, and I'm going to take from you rather than give to you. It's survival of the fittest then. You can't serve two masters. You say yes to one, you say no to the other. But when you say yes to that master, you say yes to all those things that come with that master. You can't serve both God and money. And so then in verse 21, he says, Therefore, based on the idea that if you have treasure on earth, it's going to rust, it's going to be corrupt, it can be taken from you, it can be burned up. If you say yes to that, if your heart and your treasure are indicative of bad things, if the light in your body is darkness, if those things are happening and then you've decided to serve the master that is materialism, there's ruination. Because of that warning, because of the idea of, look, have a treasure that can't be taken away from you. Have a treasure that'll last forever. Have a treasure that can't be corrupted with rust or moths. It can't be stolen. Have a treasure that's in heaven that's eternal. Have a master who is selfless and full of love. And since you can't serve both, therefore I tell you, don't worry. Don't worry about your life. Don't worry about what you'll drink or eat. Or don't worry about your body, what you'll wear. Is life not more important than food? And is the body not more important than clothes? Jesus basically says, when you think about life and you think about the big issues of life, they go way beyond what we put in our body or what we put on our body. Now this is not to say that we're not supposed to be diligent. This is not supposed to say we're not supposed to be accountable. This is not to say that there's no responsibility of stewardship. There's no obligation for us to be providers for our families. None of that. What it says is, don't make the focal point of your life, the worry, the fragmentation from everything else to this. Don't become obsessed about what you're going to eat or what you're going to drink or what you're going to wear. Because life is more important than food. The body is to be used for something much more important than a display of clothing. In fact, he goes ahead and says in verse 26, look at the birds of the air. They do not sow. They do not reap. And they don't store away in barns. And yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not more valuable than one of them? I'm fascinated by wildlife. I've watched animals since I was a kid. I've drawn animals when I first started to draw. But Jackie still gets, I don't guess, aggravated at me. But we'll be driving like, there's a deer. Honey, how many deer have you seen in your 25 years of hunting? And you still get excited about seeing a little doe on the side of a road in the middle of a cornfield. Yeah, I do. Because they're fascinating. And everything from the little chipmunks all the way up to if you can see a bear, I want to see it. And birds, all kind of birds. I love hummingbirds. I watch hawks. You go on a long road trip with me and I'm going to point out the hawks. I know where the eagle's nest are between here and Scottsboro. I know where the eagle's nest is over to County Lake. Fascinated, but it's not just the wildlife, but it's that God provided them with a way to sustain life. And that's what Jesus says. Look at the little birds. They don't plant gardens. They don't reap harvest. They don't store stuff away in the barns. And yet your heavenly Father feeds them. What's your value? Are you as valuable as a bird? Are you as valuable as one of those little grass sparrows? If you don't know what a grass sparrow is, a French fry bird at McDonald's. You sit out there on the picnic tables at McDonald's and the little birds scatter all around you. Yeah, that's a grass sparrow. Are you not more valuable? Yes. You're much more valuable. You're created in the image of God. You share a spark of His immortality. You're created in His image and His Son died for you. You're way more valuable than a little bird. And yet our Heavenly Father feeds them. Is He not going to feed us? Who, by worrying, can add a single hour to his life? The variant translation of that is, who by worrying can add a single cubit to his stature. I guess I like that translation better. What he's talking about is, can you make yourself taller by worrying about it? Can you make yourself clothes by worrying about it? Can you make yourself full by thinking about food? No. He's basically talking about, look, you control the things you control. And don't worry about the things that you don't control. And God is going to be benevolent to us. God's going to be benevolent to us, number one, because He loves us. God's going to be benevolent to us because that's His nature. As we studied earlier during this studies, he said, the rain comes on the just and the unjust. God sends His blessings on people that don't deserve it. And we're way more important than the little birds, way more important than the little chipmunks, way more important than the little squirrels. And God clothes them. and God feeds them, and we can be fed and clothed as well. Now, he's not saying go out here and live under a bridge and don't work and don't have a job. There's several other Bible passages that say, if a man doesn't work, don't let him eat. When the Bible talks about people using their riches, that we should be people who, if we are blessed with riches, that we should be rich in good deeds, willing to give, ready to share. Shouldn't be haughty, shouldn't put our trust in those riches, but put our trust in God. That's what it means not to worry about those things. It doesn't mean that we don't have jobs. It doesn't mean that we don't plant food. It doesn't mean we don't buy food. What it means is it's not our obsession. It's not the focus of our life. It's a related issue. I've got to have food and clothes to do the things I'm supposed to do for God. I got to have food and clothes to use my body as a service for God. I've got to have food and money to help other people and take care of my family, but it should not be my obsession. And so can you worry and make yourself taller? No, trust me. I know you can't worry about your height and be taller. God says, look, you control what you control, and you let me worry, let me be in charge of the things that I do control. So he keeps going. Can you add a single cubit to your stature by worrying? Can you add a second to your life by worrying? Well, the obvious answer to that is no, you can't. So he responds to that rhetorical question. Why then do you worry about clothes? See, control the controllables. If you can't, by worrying, make your life longer, and if you, by worrying, can't make yourself taller, then why are you worried about clothes? You see the lilies of the field, how they grow? They do not labor, they do not spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If this is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Look, can you worry and get taller? No. Can you worry and live longer? No. Well, if the obvious answer to that, then why do you worry about clothes? Look at a little wildflower in a field. They don't labor, they don't spin. And yet if you compare the beauty of a flower, the elegance and the simplicity and the symmetry, and you compare it to Solomon. And Solomon was rich. Solomon sat on a throne that had 7 steps, and on each side of each step was a golden lion. He sat on a golden throne that had a lion carved on each side. Solomon had so much gold in his kingdom that they counted silver as gravel. Hey, look at that little flower out there, that little wildflower, the field. This is not some exotic something you've planted in an orchid greenhouse. This is just a flower in the field. In its beauty and its symmetry, if you compared it to Solomon, no comparison. Now, if a little flower that is used, it's growing in the field today, and then you pull it and you throw it in the oven to warm those clay ovens that they had in Palestine. If God will dress one of those like that, won't you have clothes? Won't you be able to wear the things that it takes to shelter the body from the cold or protect the body from the sun? And don't be obsessed with what you wear, what the name brand is, how much it cost or didn't cost. Don't be so obsessed with these things that you forget that it's God who provides all good things. And then he says, if you're so worried about that you're not serving God but serving this master, if you're pursuing those kinds of things rather than pursuing the things of God, then it's indicative that your treasure's lost, your eyes are bad, and you've got little faith. So, verse 31, don't worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear? The pagans run after these things, and your Heavenly Father knows you need them. He says, the people who aren't God's people, the people who aren't connected to God, live their lives obsessed. What are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? What are we going to wear? What does it look like? How does it? It's almost that they use those things as a status symbol. And the Pharisees were doing that. The Sadducees were worse. If I've got this and it looks like that, then you can tell something. No, you can't. God says, I tell something about you, about what your eyes focus on and what your heart is. And so don't be like the pagans. Don't be like the people who aren't the people of God and pursue your life with this obsession about material things. Because having material things doesn't make you righteous, and not having material things doesn't make you unrighteous. God gives those blessings to people. And God gives us those blessings, and we have a requirement to use them to serve other people and to serve God, or in serving God, serving other people. So what does he say? For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. God knows you need these things. God understands how we're made. God takes care of the birds. God takes care of the grass. God takes care of you. So, since God knows you need these things, instead of running after them like the pagans, verse 33, but a contrast. Since God knows you need these things, you don't have to run after them like the pagans. Seek first the kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you. See, the idea behind worry is not that you don't give it a thought. The idea is not that you're not, being diligent and being a person of responsibility and being a provider, but it means don't be obsessed with it. What are you seeking? This is not about a thought process as much as it is an obsession. Yeah, you have to eat to live. You have to wear clothes to be decent. You have to have clothes to be sheltered. But Jesus says, look, if you will seek first God's kingdom, probably means if you live as people of responsibility and integrity. That's part of being in the kingdom. A person of responsibility and integrity will be able to provide a living, will be able to have those things. And even in those times when you can't do those things, it seems that he says if your agenda is God-driven, if you seek first the kingdom, when it comes time to choose between my will, my needs, or God's will, I pick God's will, and then my needs will be taken care of. So, don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Jesus again says, when you think about does my status, does what I have, does what I eat, does what I wear, does it say anything about me? Yeah, it does. It says that where your treasure is, there your heart is. It says that your attitude about this stuff tells you which master you're serving. Your relationship to material things tells us whether or not you're serving God or mammon. Your relationship to material things tells us about whether or not we have faith in stuff or faith in God. Our relationship to material things tells us whether or not we're obsessed with the things of this world or if we're obsessed with the creator of this world. He said, look, control the controllables. Don't worry about tomorrow. It's not here yet. Don't worry about yesterday. It's already gone. Live in today. It's the present. You take care of the controllables. Do the doables. Do the things that God gives you the opportunity to do, because opportunity equals responsibility. And don't let your financial status, your socioeconomic situation, or anything else make you feel like you're a second-class citizen in the kingdom, because God doesn't look at those things. What God looks at is the heart. And God blesses not just his children, but God blesses all the children he created. Thanks for studying with us. Next week, we'll wrap up the Sermon on the Mount by talking about that fourth pillar. And we'll talk about the idea that the Pharisees sometimes built themselves up righteously by comparing themselves to others, and sometimes they used a self-selected criterion. We're the folks at Meridianville Church of Christ. We're your neighbors. We love you. If we can help you in any way, there's a number to contact us on the screen. And then that's a spiritual need or a physical need in these tough times. But in any way, shape, or form that we can be of service to you, please contact us. Let us know. God bless the reading of his word, and God bless you. Thanks for joining us.